African Diaspora News channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give the video a big thumbs up, and share the broadcast, would you? Thank you so very much. Family, I want you to take a brief look at this first clip of President Ursula Von Der Leyen, who just flew back to Kenya to start the initial process of a new trade agreement. Now, if you'll recall, some months back, I did some coverage on the African Climate Summit that took place. I believe it was about September, where world leaders, African world leaders, and of course, other world leaders such as President Von der Leyen attended this conference, this summit in Nairobi, Kenya, right? I want you to take a listen to this first clip of President Von der Leyen speaking in Kenya.
But we are so close at heart. We both champion democracy and human rights. We both are strong advocates of an international rules-based order. And in this regard, I thank you for supporting Ukraine, our neighbor and aspiring member. And I want you to know that the European Union welcomes and supports your constructive role for peace and stability in the East African region and in the Horn of Africa. Chains and diversify them with trusted, like-minded partners. And Kenya is a trusted, like-minded partner. So we are deepening trade ties and we are building up our own economic resilience. So this economic partnership agreement is a win-win situation on both sides. Very important.
Okay. My alarm bells are ringing. Did you hear her thank them, talking about they're on different continents and all that kind of stuff, but they're close at heart. They believe in democracy and all that. And she thanked him for his support of Ukraine. And she also mentioned and hinted at him standing for democracy and peace and mentioned some of the regions, other regions in Africa that, of course, we all know that they consider to be really problematic, and those that they are concerned about coups and so forth, right? Throwing off hegemonic colonialist supremacy in their countries. So by her making these statements, she seems to be separating. No, she not seems to be. She's separating Kenya as one of the lone pariahs that shows any respect to anti-Black, anti-African Ukraine by throwing that in there. And by mentioning some of the West African countries and other regions as if that was a tacit rejection of Black citizens and the Black grassroots rising up and throwing off the chain of colonialism. And she talked about the importance of having new supply chains. That's something that you're going to hear the geopolitical conversation amongst really any right now. They're going to be really emphasizing this notion of important new supply chains. All that is about, family, is the United States and Western Caucasian European factions and nations are very worried now because they're being kicked out and they're being exposed in a way that they never have before by the global South, which of course includes the continent and other mostly melanated countries. She knows that they're being exposed, and they know that their access to minerals and resources and trade routes that they know that they cannot get unless they're connected to a global South nation leaves them in utter devastation. So the West has to find a foothold, and they have to find the weakest link. Now, of course, President Ruto, we've been covering you because you've been doing a lot of suspect things around the way in Kenya. You've been sending, willing to send your little forces and stuff to Haiti. You've been doing a lot of little weird stuff that folks are trying to figure out. Now, some of us are hoping that you're being strategic, but some of this just sounds straight up smelling kind of selloutish. It's smelling kind of traitorish. Now, again, I like to give my brothers and sisters the benefit of the doubt. with the hopes that they would be very strategic in how they're moving. But we're still going to throw out these warnings because we let you know that we're watching y'all real, real close around this piece. And something is not looking and smelling right by how you move it. Now, I know President Ruto is desperate to pull his people out. He made some promises and agreements to get them in a better economic position. I know that sometimes you have to do things that may not on the surface prima facie appear to be wise. So I'm not going to prejudge that, and I'm careful not to do that. But at the same time, we're just trying to make sure that you know that we're watching you real, real close. And you're going to be treated and held accountable if you sell out your continent. I want that to be clear. Now, for those of you that don't know, some months back, it was already known that Kenya was trying to do, sort of this both sides with Ukraine and Russia. And in my understanding, based on some of my research, is that for a long time, I believe Russia's ambassador and so forth really avoided really connecting with Kenya because of that. And they seemed like they, that they were, really trying to rock a little bit too much with Ukraine. And so then I believe that the foreign minister, Lavrov, I believe, did a surprise visit to Kenya, or the sideline meeting, I should say, with the Kenyan official, right? I want to say it was Ruto, but I have to double check that because I've been doing so much research. I don't want to mix up the information, but he did a sideline meeting with Kenya. And so that was surprising to some folks. And so now to hear Ursula Von Der Leyen come out and say, thank you for standing with Ukraine, you know how anti-Black, anti-African Ukraine is. And even if you don't believe in none of that, and you talking about you believe in a rules-based order, you do understand that Ukraine is full of Nazis and that the United States was involved in a coup to take over in 2014, a democratically elected president of Ukraine. But because he was pro-Russia, the United States conspired to overthrow them. You do know that, President Ruto. You do know that the Ukrainians were terrorizing and deleting mass deletions of Russian folks and mistreating them, which forced Russia to get involved after so many years. You do know that, sir. So again, I'm hoping that you're trying to be strategic here on the stage, but we're just throwing it out there that we're watching you. I hope this is one of those, you're not letting your right hand know what the left hand is doing, or vice versa. That's what I'm hoping is going on here. And this is shocking. It's kind of suspect, this deal. And by the way, let me give you a little bit of information on it. First of all, they've already been in trade. They've been doing trade to the tune of billions of dollars for some time now. But a little bit of information: Kenya and European Union move closer to sealing an economic partnership agreement that will grant the East African nations exports duty-free status and unlimited access to the bloc. Both sides had initialed a draft deal in June after 7 months of negotiations. The EU is one of Kenya's biggest export markets. The deal was approved by the European Union Council last week. It will now be presented to the parliaments on both sides for ratification before it comes into force. One of the other things I should say, it says that one of the provisions or agreements is over time, European goods will also gain preferential access to Kenyan markets. So I'm concerned because I don't know, what does that mean, preferential access to the Kenyan markets? I'm just trying to, that's the part I want to get clear. Also, this piece discusses the fact that Kenya is a major exporter of tea, coffee, flowers, fruits, and vegetables to the EU, which accounts for 21% of its overall exports. It buys machinery, pharmaceuticals, and other chemicals from the EU. Bilateral trade between the two stood at a total of 3.3 billion euros in 2022, EU and Kenya government data showed, making it the East African nation's second largest trade partner. Just so you know that Kenya signed an initial EU trade agreement in 2016 alongside of its partners in 6 other nations. Now, my concern was this, and you heard Ms. Von der Leyen say this during her address, and it was her hope that this would basically be an open door for other nations, African nations, basically to follow suit. That's my warning, is to make sure that y'all not tripping up our people, and that this new trade agreement that you're signing with the EU is not a trick bag, and it's not a sneaky way for the EU to pimp you, to use you, and to later on impose economic sanctions because you may become unduly reliant on them. It's my hope that's not the case. Why am I bringing that up? You all understand that the trade agreements that the United States have with several African countries that I have been discussing at length, right, have been now impeded, where the United States is using that as an albatross, as a manipulation tool to force African countries to do what she wants it to do. How many of you all know that because certain African nations like Uganda have refused to rescind their LGBT law that they've passed and so forth, that the United States has punished them now by kicking them off of their trade agreement? We see that the United States made that same threat to South Africa. I want to warn my African nations to be very strategic and very clear and make sure that you have the EU right where you want them on the negotiating table. So if they would dare try to pimp you, control you, and it smells like that, I'm feeling like that Ms. Von der Leyen made, coerced, asked President Ruto to make it official that he's on the side of Ukraine in order for them to get this deal. She wanted to be able to say that so that it would look like a win for her to all of the EU and to the Western world and to America. That we got at least one African nation that's standing with Ukraine. No, we ain't really standing with Ukraine, lady. So if you're trying to be strategic, Mr. Ruto, I'm just saying, don't y'all be silly. Talk black to me, somebody. Are y'all hearing me? Don't you be silly and get caught up to where this trade agreement is just a trick bag. The trade agreement with many of the African nations that's known as AGOA, which I have done several broadcasts on, is considered to be a landmark preferential trade program that allows countries in sub-Saharan Africa to export products to the United States tariff-free. And of course, AGOA is the African trade, a notorious, African trade program that the United States is now used, which stands for the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which the United States is using now to kick off African nations left and right when she doesn't do what she wants her to do. Make sure that this trade agreement isn't that. Please, can you? How many of you all know that economics is warfare? My name is Vicki Dillard. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it below. Be sure to comment, family, and also be sure to check out our app. We're so excited that we have an app for African Diaspora News Channel. That's going to help to expand our voice. Our voice is going to remove certain limitations and restrictions when you download, when you join, and when you tell everybody you know. I believe you're going to love it. My name is Vicki Dillard. Be sure to check out my website so you can learn about my products and services at VickiPlanet.com. That's VICKI Planet.com. I can't wait.